'cause I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you.
Hi, this is Jamie,
Hi, this is Allison.
and welcome back to another episode of Young Onset series with Dementia and Co. Today we've got another very special guest who's joining us over Zoom.
My dear, dear friend from UK. And it is Kent, I believe.
It is Kent, yes.
Yeah. And Chris Norris has done lots and lots of work already for the Dementia Society in UK and also supporting many people around the world. So thank you very much for generously giving us your time and to share your journey with us. So first of all, Chris Norris, can you tell us more about who he is?
Okay, yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? But so I was born in Windsor. Well, I wasn't born in Windsor, but I grew up near Windsor. From the age of 2. Not in the big house on the top of the hill with all the flags and the soldiers going up and down. You understand? But not far from there. In fact, there was a thing that was signed back in 1215, the Magna Carta, which is the basic laws of all our country. And I suppose, lived about half a mile from that. So anyway, I grew up. I've got 5 brothers and sisters, 1 brother and 4 sisters, and I'm the exception to the rule because they all went off to university and did that sort of thing. I joined the army at the age of 15 as a junior musician, so I went off to the Guards Depot, which is the ultimate training place in England for all Guards soldiers, and so I kind of went to the University of Life because when I went there, I was only 5 foot tall, had blonde hair, blue eyes, spoke with a lisp. And it was a very different world to the world that I'd kind of grown up in. And I had to learn very quickly to adapt to that kind of life. In actual fact, I stayed at the height of 5 foot till I was nearly 18 years old. I just didn't grow. And my voice didn't break either until I was 18. So you can imagine it was quite an experience living in a man's world with a lisp, blonde hair, blue eyes, and a soprano voice.
Yeah, I hope you sang too.
Yeah, so but I got by, and I was well supported. Having finished at Purbright, I then went to Nelhall School of Music, which is the ultimate kind of training academy for musicians in the army. And I spent a year there, and then went to my regiment, which was the Mounted Band of the Lifeguards. Now, you've probably seen the Mounted Band of the Lifeguards. When you look at the Trooping of the Colour, if you've ever seen that, you have all the soldiers marching up and down, but you've got a group of guys all sitting on horses playing their instruments. I was one of those, playing my instrument, going up and down, and hoping to goodness that the horse just behaved itself, because you've only got one hand. If you're playing the cornet, which is what I played, you've only got one hand to control the horse. I did play the saxophone as well, which is even harder because then you need both hands.
No hand for the horse.
That's it. And so you just have to hope that the horse follows the one in front. So, and I was also a state trumpeter. So I did a lot of fanfare work, kind of following the Queen around the country. Wherever she went, we went blowing her fanfares. So it was a grand old life, but I decided, so I was in the army for 6 years, and then I decided to come out and start my next profession, and that was as a police officer. So I was a village policeman in Kent. A village policeman. I had 3 villages that I looked after, and or they're now known as resident beat officers. And it was very important to get to know the people in the village and the people in the village to get to know me, because if I needed any assistance, then I knew it was going to be 15, 20 minutes away. Plus, my radio didn't work to the main town. It wouldn't connect. So you had to keep the people on your side. And in fact,
Right.
it was such that if trouble arose, although I might have spoken to the scallywags the day before and whatever, when trouble did arise, I'd found the villagers would all be behind me saying,
Yep.
this is Chris, this is our policeman, you leave him alone. And that's kind of what you needed. I mean, these days in policing, it's very hard to get that because people don't have that contact with people. And I'm a firm believer that you must have good contact with people and an understanding. I very rarely took my pocketbook out to report people because I could say to them, look, John, get that sorted out because I'm going to see you tomorrow anyway. So why not? And most people would. So having done that for quite a number of years, I retired from the police through ill health, and I became a driving instructor, and I did that for the best part of 10 years, teaching people to drive, and then I became a driving examiner. So I kind of swapped sides. I was on the other side of the fence. A bit harder to build up a relationship with people on their driving test because, of course, they're really nervous. But I carried all my beliefs through. I believe that you should put people at their ease, and then they can produce the very best person that they are. But of course, the core running through all of that was when I was in the army, when I was in the police force, as an instructor and as an examiner, you couldn't actually say a lot of the time what you're actually thinking. You had to be very tactful because that's my very nature, to try and be tactful and not be blunt. So it all came to a head in about 2010. I realized that things were starting to go a little bit wonky, a bit wrong. I was starting to mix up my words, and I was starting to lose my patience, which was not like me because that was a kind of complete change of character. I was a very patient person. So I went to the doctors, and in fact, it took me the best part of 2 years before I got my dementia diagnosis, which was in 2012.
Yeah.
One of the main things that made me realize that something was going wrong was when you go out on a driving test or take somebody out on a driving test, as you're going around, you've got your clipboard there and you're merrily marking off any little things that are happening or any major things that are happening. And then when you get back, you then debrief what happened on the driving test. You obviously give the person their result, and then you explain the reasons why the result is the way that it is. And things have greatly changed. It used to be when you went on a driving test, the examiner kind of sat there very stiff-lipped and straight-faced, and then at the end, they just underlined what you'd done wrong and say, those are the things you got wrong, see you another time. These days, you don't do that. These days, you then debrief it. So, and also the driving instructors can now come out in the back and watch everything you're doing, which is good and right. But what I found was happening was that I knew what I'd marked down was correct because I'd marked it down as it was happening. But when I came to talk about it and the order that it happened in, this now became very difficult.
A challenge.
Very challenging. And then the instructor would perhaps lean forward and say, oh, Chris, what happened? When was that? What happened? And I was having more and more difficulty putting it in the correct order and sequence. As soon as you finish the test, you dash upstairs to your office. You've got 10 minutes to write up the report on it, and then off you go, and it all starts again. Another person has their driving test. And it became more and more of a challenge. Another aspect was you're based at one place, but you also go to other towns to do the driving tests to help out there. So you have to learn all their routes because there's about 15 driving test routes for each town. And most people could go out and learn that route just by doing it once or twice. I had to keep going round it, to learn it. And I remember my manager said, Chris, I can't understand. Why do you find that so difficult to remember? I mean, bearing in mind, I used to go to 6 different towns, and if you multiply 6 by 15, that's an awful lot of test routes to try and remember. But so I was aware the things weren't right. Went to see, finally, I got the GP to refer me to the memory clinic. Whoa, that's the place I needed to be. Because as good as general practitioners are, they have to know about everything, and so there's that phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. So they have this huge knowledge, but because I was only 56 when I first started having my challenges, 58 when I got diagnosed, they came up with all sorts of reasons that you can't possibly have dementia because you're too young. And that's the last thing they looked at. And they came up with all sorts of ideas. Oh, it's migraine. Well, doctor, I haven't got any headaches. Oh, you don't have to have a headache for migraine. Oh.
The pressure. Yeah.
Then in the end, so they looked at all the other things that could possibly be. And I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME.
Right.
And we thought, well, that's the end of it. But I knew it wasn't. I could feel that it wasn't. That wasn't all it was about. And so 6 months further on, I then got diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia, which is a one of the rarer types of dementia.
Absolutely.
Kind of everybody thinks of dementia being Alzheimer's. They think of an older person. And unfortunately, when you mention the word dementia, people go to the end stages. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And all people can picture in their head, well, if it's dementia, you're locked in, you're sat in the corner, you can't say anything, and you can't join in, and
or you can't walk, or you can't feed yourself.
Completely wrong idea of what it's all about. So
may I ask, actually, sorry, did you have that idea in your mind when you were first told that this is a type of dementia?
Well, I kind of, as you do, I've been on Google and tried to self what's his name myself. But I have
self-diagnosis.
When I went to the memory clinic, and they were quite upfront. They said, well, we're going to do a number of investigations now. The end result could be dementia. And I thought, well, that's good that they've said that. But of course, you're thinking, well, I hope it isn't that.
Because
because of the perception that society has around dementia. We've come a long way in the last 10 years around the subject of dementia. And I liken it to the journey with people with cancer. I mean, 10 years ago, the word cancer was one of those words that people said behind their hand and kind of whispered it. And now with cancer, not only are people perfectly open about the fact that they are living with cancer, they'll actually tell you which part of them has got cancer. And that's what I hope will happen with dementia, that people will understand and realize that the word dementia is not a word that should be hidden away. I use it all the time. I use it freely. I'm not afraid to use it. And gradually, people are now understanding that there is more to dementia than just Alzheimer's.
But just one thing, right? I mean, now we have everybody listening to Chris Norris going, speaking about dementia, about your journey so eloquently, and they're thinking, like Alison Lim and our other friends. Are you sure they have dementia?
No way.
What do you? So what do you say to that?
Well, initially, people said, "Well, you can't possibly have dementia," and I used to say, "Well, why is that?" And they say, "Well, you're too young, or you don't look like it." In fact, I I had an abscess in one of my teeth, and I went to the emergency dentist at the hospital because it was the weekend, and I filled in his form, and I put on the form that I'm living with dementia. And as he was treating me, I got a bit mixed up with my words. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's the dementia getting in the way." And he looked at me eyeball to eyeball and said, "You haven't got dementia."
Yep.
Now, it used to really annoy me because why would I say I have if I haven't? Unless
Yeah.
I've got, what's that condition?
Munchausen.
That'll be it, Munchausen. I knew it was German. I couldn't think the word.
Yeah.
But this time I decided to say, well, what makes you say that? And he said, well, looking at you, he said, normally people with dementia, their eyes are all dull, they can't really say anything. And I said, well, there you go, learning curve, isn't it? Because you will see, I am living with dementia because I've put it on your form, and I am able to still talk. Yes, I do get mixed up. Sometimes I get in a right muddle with. I have to think carefully what I said there.
Yes.
I saw that.
My words.
Right.
And it kind of made me think, well, this is going to be my mission now in life, because when you're working, when you meet somebody for the first time, the first question you find out is what their name is. Normally, the next question is might be where do you live, but certainly the third question, if not the second one, is and what do you do? And your job generally kind of defines you. Suddenly, I had to retire from being an examiner because I couldn't do the job anymore, and they couldn't move me sideways because it's a very face-to-face thing to do, isn't it? You can't sit in the office and watch a video of somebody driving.
No, yeah.
You could do, but it probably wouldn't work.
Right.
So
Maybe in the future.
Yeah. So suddenly I've lost that bit that defines you. Now my whole mission and career in life is to create understanding around the subject of dementia and to debunk all the wrong ideas that people have around dementia. And what I often say is, answering your question there, Alison, is that when I'm on stage talking or at a conference or something like that, people have come to me afterwards and say, "Yeah, you don't really understand dementia." And I've said, "Well, why is that?" And they said, "Well, and these are the people, normally the carers, the people who are caring for those in those last
down the journey.
Stages. Yeah.
And of course, I haven't experienced that. Thank goodness. I'm not there yet. I'm still in the early to middle stages. And I can understand why they said that. But at the same time, I think it's good to create that clear understanding. But the person that people see, like you're seeing today here and on stage, is what I call the Superman version. I'm up there bouncing off the walls. I'm full of baked beans and raring to go. But the real true Clark Kent, which is the alter ego of Superman, is the one that lives alone with my wife and my family. They're the ones that see me stumbling over, trying to say things. They're the ones that hear me say some strange and odd things. They're the ones that see me perhaps being a little bit, very un-PC. It's hard enough in this world now anyway, isn't it, to remember, you mustn't say this words and you mustn't say that. But when you're living, particularly frontal temporal dementia, you lose that
Filter.
The filter, yes, that's a good word.
When a young child sees somebody with a big nose, they go, "Oh, they've got a big nose, haven't they?"
Yeah.
And shush, you can't say that. And
reminds me of Jamie.
And that sort of filter is now going, and so now my mouth is in motion before my brain can get into gear. The other aspect is that people look at, when you're having a conversation with somebody, they just carry on their normal way. what they don't
Yes.
realize is they're just cruising along. They're just,
Yep.
but we are, people living with dementia, we're going 100 miles an hour and we're paddling
Struggling to
like
catch up. Yep.
to try and keep up. So
Yeah.
sometimes I have to retire from a conversation. Big
Yep.
groups of people are now difficult for me, even smaller groups of people. And I sometimes my wife notices it. She realizes when I'm going very quiet because I can't keep up any longer. I just retreat into myself. And
Right.
the verbose, that's a good word, write that one down, verbose
Oh, bravo.
person that you're seeing here on the screen
Yes.
disappears and I become very quiet. Sometimes people think that I'm being a bit aloof, and
Right.
sitting back. And it's not that. It's just that I can't cope anymore with what is going
But
on
it is
around me.
quite good, right, Chris? Once in a while to be ourselves and sit back. Now we know the situation, we know ourselves. And when we have the confidence that I'm not going to bother with this masses because
Mhm.
I can't handle it, they don't know it. So it's fine. Let me just sit aside and watch the game or be with myself and relax for a while. But everything
I
that you've mentioned is so good for the, like I keep stressing to the community here, and I have exactly the same response for more people to explain ourselves of what we're going through and how our care partners are facing. I have to say that, because we have quite intimate discussions with the whole group, we do hear of, yes, your words coming through, and we appreciate that because we know you and you know us. So whatever comes up is fine with us. And we really want to know the real person, right? So I think to have a community to appreciate that is also extremely important. But
and that's why I'm very, very upfront with people. And very early on in any conversation, I let them know that I am living with dementia. Because then if something goes a bit wonky or awry, and I kind of say, I'm sorry, that's the dementia. But they can understand that it isn't me, it's the
yeah,
condition that's causing these challenges or problems.
right.
Some people forget it, some people will ignore it, some people go, well, you shouldn't be so rude, or you shouldn't be, you shouldn't say that. Well, I know I shouldn't say it afterwards, perhaps.
Yeah.
Sometimes I realize, sometimes I don't.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a day later, or my wife will prompt me and say, "Well, this is what you said." And I go, "No, yes, you did." No, that wouldn't be it. But
Yep. Jamie has many of these experiences we have, right? Yep.
I have to accept. I have to believe totally what my wife tells me is true. So there's other times when with frontal temporal dementia, allegedly it doesn't affect your memory until the later stages, but in actual fact, it does. And
Yeah.
these days, my more recent memory is starting to get a bit more challenging and difficult. So something that happened today, yesterday, or in the last week is becoming more vague. Conversely, I'm finding that the further I go back, the more my memories are becoming more stronger, and I can
Yep.
now remember almost the conversations that were actually had word for word.
Thank you for that, Chris. Yes, I have the same.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
And my friends are telling me, oh, you don't mention because your memory is much stronger than mine.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've been getting this is lovely for me actually in a strange way because I've been getting a lot of stories from that I wasn't around for being
Yeah.
young. That these stories are sort of coming in more and more detail now that
Right.
it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
than before.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
But just for everybody's information, Chris and I actually have one part, similar diagnosis. So we have FTD, frontal temporal dementia, and under that we have PPA, which is primary progressive aphasia. And Chris and I have the type called logopenic, which actually has issue in retrieving words. And that's
primary issue.
Yeah, the primary issue. Yeah. And this in the long term could lead to Alzheimer's as well. But as Chris is now explaining, mine is very, very short term, like immediate. But our longer term memory, yes, I'm
Yeah.
now experiencing that is becoming stronger.
I'm a bit greedy because I've got a bit of the behavioural type and
Yes.
the bit of the aphasia type. I'm just jolly greedy, really, you know. But you are right. The frontal temporal dementia, which affects the frontal and the front and the sides of the brain.
Yep.
Alzheimer's starts at the back, but
Yeah.
Alzheimer's gradually works its way forward across your brain.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
frontal temporal dementia works its way backwards. So there comes a point where they go, "Oh, hello, I'm FTD.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Mr. Alzheimer's. How do you do?" And they meet up. And but that's fingers crossed. That's a long way down the journey. I mean, it's 10 years now. So going back to the question,
Yes.
initially when people used to say to me, "Oh, you're too young to have dementia." Now, what I get after 10 years is people say, "Are you sure you've got dementia?" I go, "Well, why is that?" They say, "Well, 10 years, nobody's around after with 10 years with dementia. You can't possibly have it." Well, you can. Here, I'm living
Yep.
proof. You can.
Yes.
Um,
Yep. And
so
our friend from Australia is in her 14th year
Mm.
and still doing fine and traveling. But there are many other challenges at home, like you mentioned. She has a bit more now that people don't see. And therefore you think, oh, how can you have dementia after 14 years? No.
What do you mean you're still functioning after 14 years of dementia?
how
Well,
dare
functioning is a
you?
broad term.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how dare you function well? You why don't you fit my picture of somebody living with dementia that's off in the
Exactly.
corner somewhere? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
just a rebel.
No. But it's so good to understand you too, because I never thought that you were I mean, you must have mentioned, and I did not register.
Register.
But
But
you're
then she was so tactful and so,
yes. I never knew that. But I always know that you were a jolly person. But now I also understand why after 10 years you're still in good shape, because you have that personality. You have the personality to go out to people, to reach out to other people, to give support and also receive support, which is really, really very important, especially for dementia. I mean, for everything else. But yeah,
That's true, because that isolationist response is what will wreck the.
When I was growing up, I everybody thought I was a very stubborn person. Now I think that being stubborn has helped me because I'm stubborn in as much as, dementia isn't going to get me yet. Yes, there's things I can't do that I could do before, but I'm a very great believer in dementia comes in cans. And people go, "What do you mean in cans? You can't buy it." I go, "No, you've got to focus on the things you can do and not the things you
yes,
can't." I mean, let's be
absolutely.
honest. When we were young, there were lots of things that we could do. Like I used to do an awful lot of, when I was at school, I used to run for the county cross country team. The only thing that runs now is my nose, and I don't expect
Ah.
to be able to run anymore because at 69, I kind of realize that there's some things that you can't do. But I don't go, "Oh, if only I could do that still," because I accept,
Tell
you've
us
got
about your post-diagnosis, Chris. After you were diagnosed, how did you and your family feel, and how did you approach it?
right. Well, when I was given my diagnosis, my wife was there with me, and there was a part of me that was not pleased but relieved because
Yeah.
I knew something wasn't right, and now I knew the reason why it was, and so I could draw a line in the sand and say, right, that's it. We'll move on from this. I've still got a life, but it'll just be a different sort of life. So initially, it's wrong to say I was pleased to get, because nobody wants to be given a terminal illness diagnosis, do they? And then for a while afterwards, as the sort of dust settled a bit, then I did have to come to terms with it a little bit and deal with the challenges and realize, because you start to think about, oh my goodness, and I fell into the trap that everybody said, "Oh dear, you know, in a year's time, I still won't be here or whatever, you know, and because that's what when you Google our type of dementia, you know, they say, well, between 2 and 8 years or 2 and 5 years, and
I
you
got
won't be
5 to 8 years.
functioning,
Yes.
you know, and I mean, although I pushed the consultant, how long have I got? They wouldn't give me an answer. And basically, how long is a piece of string? Because that's the
Yeah.
answer. That's what they
Right.
said to me. Well, you know, and but we do. Dr. Google, unfortunately, does tell us the worst things, and if we believe everything on there, then so I decided, well, I'll take that with a pinch of salt. Let's see what happens. So post-diagnosis, then I did a thing called cognitive stimulation therapy in a
Yeah.
group, and we all came together. And having done that, I then also did a bit of cognitive behavior therapy, did a bit of that. And in fact, I did 2 cognitive stimulation ones, because one I did in my own, one I did on a one-to-one, and then
Right.
I was invited to go along to another one to encourage the people that were there to, you know, so I did about half of that, and then I thought, well, no, we've got to let these people find their own place, you know, because what then happens is, well, Chris, what are your views on this? And Chris, what do you think of this? And it's not. I realized it was starting to become all about Chris, and it wasn't. It should be about the various people there. So
Everybody else. So excuse me, did you go through this with rare dementia support, or was it private? How did you go about this?
no, this was through the memory clinic.
Oh, okay, that's very good in
I,
UK.
I came across rare dementia support a few years later. There was a guy that I did a lot of work with, giving lectures at conferences and that sort of thing to professionals, a chap called Reinhard Guss. And he was very involved with the rare dementia support. And
Right.
so that's how I came into contact with them. So anyway, I also went along to a service user support group in Canterbury, which is, I live in Ashford, and Canterbury is about 14 miles away. But this was a writing project, and it was a good idea. And I'd not met anybody, and so we all sat down. And then 2 things happened out of that. The writing project was so successful that in the end, it was turned into a book. So the book called Welcome to Our World, and it was
Yeah.
published. And
Super.
and there was, each chapter was by one of the 8 different people who had got a diagnosis of dementia, and it talked about their previous life, what they'd done in their previous life. It
Right.
also talked about their journey through their diagnosis, and it also talked about their hopes for the future. So it wasn't a negative book. On the back of that, I then became, in the end, I ended up chairing that group. And I was also approached, I was honoured to be approached by the Alzheimer's Society to become one of their ambassadors.
Yeah.
The funny thing about the Alzheimer's Society is it's there, it's brilliant, it's full of information, it's got over 250 information sheets. But the trouble is, it's the name Alzheimer's Society.
Yeah,
Because people
exactly.
get a diagnosis that isn't Alzheimer's, then
No.
they don't go to it, and they miss out on so much. So,
Yes.
so spinning us forward a little bit, during COVID, which of course, when none of us could kind of go out and about, everybody took to doing things online, and on the back of that, a few of us got together and put together a thing called, it's back to front for you people, I realise. It's called the Dementia Toolkit.
Yep.
And we'll probably put the link on for that. And the Dementia Toolkit
Definitely.
has 4 people living with dementia, 4 carers, and they, through various videos, and there are stacks of videos, they talk about all the various aspects of of living with dementia, the coping strategies that they've put in place.
Right.
And so whereas an information sheet, you know, printed out is very good, it doesn't live. Whereas this, because it's on the web, one, it changes all the time, so it's a living creature.
Yeah.
Two, it's much easier to do just to sit down with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and
Yeah.
look at it. And the first question when you go on the website is, how do you feel today? And whatever when you click on that, if you put in there, oh, I feel a bit grumpy, then it takes you straight through to some videos and some people talking about what they do when they feel grumpy and how they turn
Super.
the corner. And
I'm gonna check that out, Chris. Super.
yeah, it's brilliant. And you know, or I feel a bit foggy today, because
Yeah.
we get foggy days, don't we? And we get
Yeah.
good days.
Right.
But I always think of it like the weather, really, because although the weather might be misty and foggy one day,
Yeah.
tomorrow it could be bright sunshine. I know that's probably different in
True.
Singapore because it's all
Oh,
sunshine,
yeah.
and, you know.
Lots of sun. Lots of sun. Yeah.
But in the United Kingdom, you know, if we don't have rain every other day, we've got nothing to talk about because we talk about the weather incessantly, you know.
Super. You know, we have our different groups of forums, and that's what we do too. And the key is also not to think that when we think of, for example, a foggy day, everybody feels the same, because different people will have different interpretation and different feelings towards it, and any feeling is fine. That's a superb. Yeah, I'm gonna really follow up on that.
The toolkit.
The
Yeah.
toolkit, yes. So all those work came through from the memory clinic.
Well, that was the
One
start.
link to the other. That's a superb system you have in UK. Can
Well,
anybody just join? Or
the what happens with the memory clinic though is you really only get 3 appointments with them. You get the initial one, you get the next appointment where they go through all the various tests and sort of things, and they're getting the MRI scans done and the CT scans and all of those, and then they put it all together, and then you get your third appointment with the consultant, who then tells you what they found, and there's very much a feeling, unfortunately, that that's it, because it kind of is. Although there was the cognitive stimulation therapy, that unless there's any kind of tablets that you can be prescribed, when you then stay on their books for 6 months to a year before being referred back to the general practitioner. In our type of condition, there are no tablets to take, and so that's it really. You then really feel you've been kicked out into the long grass.
right, like most systems in the world. Yeah.
And so sometimes you have to go out and search for that help,
Absolutely.
because it doesn't automatically come to you, because one, if you don't tell anybody that you're there and you need some help, how on earth are they going to know? And it's the same when people moan about, oh, they shouldn't have treated me like that because I've got dementia. I say, well, did you tell them you got dementia? Oh, no, I wouldn't mention that. You go, well, how on earth can they help you if you
Such a great point.
you
Yeah.
don't give them just like, I'm very interested in music. I mean, I've played a musical instrument since the age of 11, and particularly brass bands now. That's my life and soul. Every summer, my wife doesn't see me at weekends because I'm on a bandstand somewhere. It always makes me chuckle, because sometimes you look at a band on the bandstand and you think, oh, there's quite a lot of musicians still going around. But I know when I look around that there's probably 5 or 6 of us that have just put a different blazer and a different tie on, and in actual fact, we're probably not part of that band. We're just helping out. But one of the things that I've found by letting people know is when I'm playing in my main band, both people sitting on either side of me, they know that I'm living with dementia, and I get very mixed up. My alphabet is gone. I can still read, but where a letter falls in the alphabet, I I'm now at a loss. And on one occasion, the conductor said, right, well, we're going to go, and I've lost my numbers as well, counting. And he said, well, we're going to go 19 bars before the letter J. Now that was a double whammy for me because I was searching and I said, I haven't got a letter J between G and H. He said, but you won't have a letter J because it isn't, is it? I thought, oh no, isn't it? But now what happens is the guys that are on either side of me, one of them, when we're given a challenge like that, he leans forward and he actually counts on the music, the number of bars, as if he needs to know where it is. He doesn't really. He knows where we're going to go from.
No.
I know he's doing it to help me. He knows he's doing it to help me, but it's never mentioned. And it's that sort of subtle help that we all need to have a good life living with dementia. And I know to some people that's contradictory to use the word good and dementia in the same sentence. But I used to say I'm living well with dementia, like a lot of people did, and that upset people then because the word well. So now I say I'm living as best I can with dementia.
Now our slogan is enjoying life with dementia. And that's what we want to tell the world, that we are enjoying life. I mean, we have our challenges, but there are things that we can enjoy. There are many things we can still do and want to do, and new things we want to learn, right? But your mention about your relationship with your friend, your partner, is that happens because you are open, and because and then you can communicate, and people know how to support us. At the same time, we can support other people.
Yeah. Do you find that when you use the phrase you said enjoying life with dementia?
Life with dementia,
you find that almost people kind of say, oh, it's almost how dare you enjoy life?
Yeah, people get offended.
How dare you? You shouldn't be, you should be.
I get lectures. Yeah. No, only until they join the group, until we explain, and then everybody is like, now we can wear this shirt proudly. Yeah. And so our whole team here have found ways to do that, and we want to explain to the world, enjoying doesn't mean that we are not, having our own challenges. We are meeting them, and also not just for people living with dementia, but especially for our care partners. I think they go through a lot of challenges, and they have to find a life too. They have to find ways to.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something when we say enjoying life with dementia, like I don't have dementia, so I'm not enjoying life with my dementia, but I'm enjoying you with your dementia.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's still, and you're not, now that you've got it, you're never without it.
Correct.
And I'm enjoying you that whole time as well.
Yes. And that's the new me. That's why we also put out, love the new me, because I don't want to go, oh, I've missed this, I've lost this, I don't have that anymore. No. I have a lot of other things we can focus on. But Chris, especially, you have supported this society, this community, for the last at least 5 to 7 years. Tell us more about your work.
I spend a lot of my time educating, and that's what I think it's all about. Not only educating the public, but also educating the National Health Service as well, because it is a very misunderstood condition, and so that is my mission, to create more understanding. And so if you Google me, because put me into Google, Chris Norris Dementia, you'll find a number of videos that various organizations have decided, he sounds a bit as if he knows what he's talking about, and and so they've put these things together, and they're all very useful. I'm not saying that to blow my own trumpet, but I'm saying it because you get different aspects, and taking us back to that website that I said. So you get an understanding. I mean, not everybody is going to understand dementia. Some people just won't get it. you know, you can talk to them till you're blue in the face. They just won't. One, partly maybe because they don't want to, and two,
Yeah.
because it's because it goes against
Yeah.
what everybody has thought. What is good
Yeah.
though is that things have moved on, and understanding has moved on greatly. And sometimes people say, well, what's the point in doing all this? Because you don't change anything. But you do. If you look back over 5 to 10 years, you can see the changes that have come about. And I kind of liken it to a rock. A rock doesn't get split open by one big heavy rainstorm. It's a constant drip, drip, drip that wears away that rock until
Yeah.
it, and so I'm just, some days I'm just too busy. I have this difficulty of saying the word no because it
Yeah.
comes out yes. You know,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like that song.
Yep. Yep.
What's that song?
I know
I'm
your
just a
schedule.
girl. I'm
You
just a
can't
girl
say
who
no.
thinks no. Yeah, I'm a bit
Yep.
like
No, no.
her. Well, I'm not like a girl, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So sometimes I do say yes to maybe too many things, and then I'm spreading myself a bit too thin, really. And
Before you go on, I want to remind everybody again to go into Chris Norris, Google that, because also that not only helps the society, but anybody living with dementia or have friends, etc., you know, experience in the family with dementia should Google it as well. And also we will be attaching that link
Yeah,
at the end of
what
the
will help?
descriptions. Yeah.
What will help, Alison, is if you put Chris Norris dementia, because if you just put Chris Norris, you'll
Yeah,
get
15.
some professor in America, and I'm not a professor.
You've done that
But if
before.
you're more specific, then it
We will
takes
do
you to
that.
the right place, you know.
Yeah. So
Otherwise
Chris Norris dementia. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
What form does that, because you mentioned that the thing you do most is educating. What form does that sort of take? Obviously, there's the speaking and the public events, but is there anything in particular that
Well, whenever I give a talk, I always use I have it written down from beginning to end, because with frontal temporal dementia, as you've probably already realized from this video here, there's a thing, an aspect of frontal temporal dementia is you don't know when to stop. You will go on and you will go on and you will go on, and you're almost waiting for that shepherd's crook to come across and pull you off the stage, you know. And so I always use a speech, written speech. Because the problem comes is when we have the question time, because now the world, and I start off answering the question, and before I know it, I've moved on to something else because that's popped into my head, and I think that's important. And so sometimes I say, I laugh about it. I say to people, look, you know, there's a prime example of it, because you know, if you, I can just waffle on, so you've got to stop me. I just suddenly brought to mind one of the things I said on stage on one occasion was about how I can move from being calm and collected to being really angry, and to being calm and collected at the drop of a hat. And I could, anyway, we had the coffee break afterwards, and I was standing in the queue, and I had a guy that there was helping me, assistant psychologist, and there was somebody else from the audience in front of me. And when I came to try and open up the coffee sachet, you know, they're difficult things to do sometimes, you know, you can't get them to tear. And suddenly I threw this almighty wobbly and threw the sachet in one direction, and the sugar went in another direction, and the coffee fell over, and then I was all calm and collected again. And the people around me were kind of looking, oh my goodness. But I turned to the guy that was with me and I said, there you are. There's a prime example of what I was saying on stage about going from being cool as the cucumber to being an angry bear lion type back to being cool as a cucumber.
Thank you for mentioning that incident, Chris, because so many of our friends have that, and people just do not understand. Thank you.
No,
And so now I let you run through your speech. You have you. Do you have another full page there to run through?
I haven't. No, I'm doing this. The reason why I'm waffling on is because I'm doing this without having any
Really?
prompts
You
in
did
front of me.
superbly.
That's why you're going to need to do an awful lot of editing to get this down to the length that you want it. But
Oh.
my belief is if the more you put out there, you put everything out there, and then people can pick the bits that they like. It's like going for a big table of food. You pick the bits,
Yeah, buffet.
and you leave the bits like, you know, the spicy stuff. If you don't like the spicy stuff, then you leave it. And that's my, you know, almost a splattergun effect, you know, like a shotgun, rather than a rifle.
Okay, Chris, tell us about the most challenging part of this journey.
Right. That's a hard question because there are challenges along the way, and my whole belief is that there must be an answer to it. There's two ways of dealing with it. One, you can either fester about it, and it can drag you down. And the other thing is just to accept it and say, well, that's that. Because I think it's a bit like a helter-skelter, you know, with getting depressed about things. But when I helter-skelter, it's easy enough to slide down that helter-skelter or that slide. It's very, very difficult to climb back up that slide. And so I kind of think, well, if you don't let yourself start to go down that slide, then I know that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But there are some things in life that you can't change. And so when I come up against a challenge, I mean, by very nature of the condition, there's a phrase, don't worry about it. Well, even when I'm trying to discuss something, because well, don't worry about it. But I do worry about it because well, don't worry about it. And that kind of sometimes drives me up the wall a little bit because I think, well, I'd like to discuss this. There's not, and well, don't worry about it. So there are challenges with my music. I mean, in years gone by, when you read a piece of music, it's like when you read a book. You don't read each individual word in actual fact. You read it in sequences. And in fact, there's this thing that I saw a while back where as long as the first letter and the last letter in each word is correct, you can read a whole load of stuff that's all spelled wrong and back to front. And it's the same in music. When you read music, you haven't got, it's all in, what's the word I'm looking for? It's in groups. You don't read each individual note. These days I have to. These days I have to read each individual note, and I have to count the length of that note in my head as well. So it does slow things down. And sometimes I find that one heck of a challenge because there's that realization of knowing that I can't do now what I could do. I was going to say with my eyes shut, but if I had my eyes shut, I wouldn't be able to read the music.
No, not really.
So there are challenges, and but I try and overcome them, and I try and move past those challenges as much as possible. Because if you can't change it, then you've got to accept you can't change it. You know, you have to.
Exactly.
You have to be realistic with yourself.
Can I ask you a tougher question? What are your fears?
I don't know the answer.
Okay, let me start again. What are your fears right now?
I fear the later stages, the end stages. I've made it very clear with my family that I don't want to get to those final stages where I'm incontinent both ways. I'm no longer able to express or be part of the world that everybody else is in. Those are my fears, and I've living with us. My son and his wife live with us as well, and his wife had brain tumors, and which took away her sight and took away a lot of her hearing as well. But in recent times, she's really deteriorated quite rapidly. So she went into hospital in February in London, and now she's come out, but she's not coming back home. She's having to go into a nursing facility because she needs 25 hours a day nursing to help her do everything. But as she was deteriorating, it was a daily reminder, watching her, seeing how she was going downhill and the difficulties she was having. And although I kept going around pushing it away, I could see that that's somewhere that I could end up. I won't say will end up, but the direction that I could go in. And because you have to be realistic. There's, I've done all right for 10 years, but you don't know what's around the corner. And it may well be that some of my friends have been very good for a long time living with dementia, and then they've suddenly gone downhill. So that's probably my biggest fear, is no longer being able to be. One is having to have all that personal care, because that's very important to me, that I can look after myself to a degree. I mean, I'm happy to have assistance. So there's that. And the other one of what's almost like locked-in syndrome, where I can't express myself anymore. People don't know what I'm thinking anymore. And so those are my biggest fears. But wait and see. I'm going to wait and see. I'm not going to, because I'm a firm believer, if you dwell on something long enough, you bring that thing about. There was the famous thing that somebody was convinced that at the age of 49, they were going to die. And the reason was because their mother had, their father had, their grandmother had, and they were convinced that. And they did. At 49, they popped their clogs. And there was no medical reason why they popped their clogs, other than the fact they had brain conditioned themselves that this is what's going to happen when I'm 49. So I'm a great believer in the power of the mind, albeit mine's wonky, but I'm still a great believer in it.
Absolutely. So we believe in preparing for the worst, like, okay, everybody has to be prepared, especially with documents and all the other stuff. And also the mindset that it's a possibility that we will go down the same way. But after we've done all that, like you say, we have to live and have a good life with it.
I mean, it's this getting practically prepared, like you just said. And the only way to be emotionally prepared is to have had a good time before that happens. That's
And so also, what would you tell people who are just coming into this journey and the people at the end? What messages would you have for people?
People coming who having just been diagnosed.
Just being diagnosed, yes.
I think speak to other people living with dementia. Go to groups like your group. Go along and see that people still do have a life with dementia.
Yes.
They can have a life with dementia. And the more you look at it, and just sometimes maybe just sit in the background and watch what's going on, get invited along and just watch what goes on. And gradually you will realize, instead of going off like a lot of people do, they'll go off and they'll lie on their settee for 6 months, a year in depression about it. But then they reach a point where they go, well, what am I doing with the rest of my time? Why am I doing that? So for people newly diagnosed, seek out as much information as you can and find organisations like your organisation, or in this country, you know, Alzheimer's Society, or there are so many good groups. There's another one called Deep Dementia Engagement Empowerment Project, and those people, you meet people who are living with a condition, and you hear about the ups and the downs, and you no longer feel isolated and alone, because strangely enough, dementia is a community in itself. And
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
you,
We have a superb one. I mean, I have one, I have so many here, and then I have 3 in the UK. It's incredible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I've met a lot of people through dementia that I would have never met before. Even
Yeah.
more so during COVID. I mean, COVID wasn't a good thing, but during COVID, we had all these Zooms going on, and
Yeah.
there's people I've met on Zoom that I still haven't met, well, like your good self, that I've
Yes,
not
there
met
you
in
go.
real life. That there's a possibility I will, if I was only to pack my bags and get my passport out and fly
Yeah,
over. Then
we're waiting for you still.
yeah,
Chris,
but,
bring all the other guys.
yeah. So you lose from you. In honesty, you do lose some friends along the way. One of them who doesn't really get the idea that I'm living with dementia, and that's mainly because their father-in-law and their mother-in-law were diagnosed with dementia after I was, and now they're both. I don't think either of them are any longer with us, actually, to almost to a point where they're going, well, how dare you still be around after 10 years when my relatives aren't? You know, I just have to accept that fact.
Yeah. But just to understand, there's so many different types, and also that we who are diagnosed can still do something about it. I think that makes a huge difference as well. The point about losing friends and relatives, I know of somebody here who has not seen his brother ever since he was diagnosed, and he was diagnosed 9 years ago. That's really sad. And also, like friends, they just disappear. However, there are also friends who hasn't seen,
Their friends.
their friends for a long time, and they appear because they read about this, like through the papers or some programs that we have done, and that's wonderful. So I always say, hey, it's a blessing. I mean, leave all the bad riddance, right? What do you say?
Good riddance to bad rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. This is the time that we can choose. Yeah, isn't that great?
There's a phrase that people say, you only live once.
Mhm.
But no, you only die once. You live every day. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, I've nicked that from somebody else. And that's what happens actually. When you're on the circuit of talking around about dementia, you hear a phrase that somebody else has used, and we don't mind.
Yep.
We just all use each other's phrases, you know. But
Exactly.
to me, that says it all, really. That you only die once, but you can live every day. If you want to live every day to the best you can, then you will. But if you don't, if you're dwelling on that nebulous idea of something's going to happen, somewhere down
Yeah.
the line, well, you're not living every day, then, are you?
Such a lovely line to end. Wow, we will all remember that. We have every single day to live to the fullest.
I
Thank
was
you
going to say, I
so
won't
much.
remember what I just said. People say to me, "Oh, remember what you said the other day?" I don't know. I'm the faintest.
It's really cool. Thank you so much, Chris. And yeah,
Pleasure.
the funny thing is I want to add this to the video because we have such great time when we have our meetings. I mean, the times that we would cry too, but most times we really have a jolly good time, like they say. But today I was watching you through this your presentation, let's say. It's not so much of a podcast together, and you just went on, and so seriously with a face, and I thought, wow, Chris is giving a great speech here. And now we have this good old friendly Chris back. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's lovely. And
My
also
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the work you've done for this, our community worldwide, and especially for supporting me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I tell you what, if from what I've said today, if it helps one person, then it's all worthwhile, isn't it? Because there was a thing about a woman that was standing on the beach and there were lots of starfish washed up, and she was throwing them back in. And somebody said to her, "What's the point of doing that? They're only going to get washed up again." He said, "Yep." She said, "But if I've helped one starfish to
Yes,
carry on, then it's all been worthwhile." And that's
absolutely.
my
Yeah.
philosophy.
Well, you helped me, so therefore it definitely helped.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you everyone who's watching for being here as well. If you want to look us up, you can find us at dementianco@gmail.com. That's the word dementia, letter N, co@gmail.com if you've got any questions. And please stay tuned for for our further podcasts in the future and other things that we'll be coming out with.
And check out Chris Norris Dementia on Google.
Yes, we'll be leaving any other links in this description underneath. So we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you.
Right.
Yep.